Good day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. The presentation will begin in exactly 2 minutes, so get comfortable. In the meantime, we'd like to remind you that any questions will be addressed at the end of the presentation. Please submit those questions via the chat function below, or if you'd prefer to remain anonymous, direct your questions to a Naluri co-host in private message. Your presenter today is Mr. Azran Osman Rani, co-founder and CEO of Naluri, followed by a Q&A session with Ms. Farah Azlin, clinical psychologist at Naluri.
Thank you everyone for joining me in today's session where I want to highlight some of the critical red flags that we commonly see in the workplace setting. To kick off, what do I mean by red flags? Red flags in this case are a metaphor for problems that require our attention. They're like a warning, if you will, that if left unaddressed, would cause more issues over time. I want you to walk away from today's session with the tools that will help you identify possible red flags in your work environment, and more importantly, with a knowledge about how do you deal with them. So in the last 25 years of my career, I've been very passionate about building high-performing and agile teams and cultures. I make it a point to spot red flags myself, to identify potentially toxic work environments that, if left unchecked, would cause discontent, resentment, and the departure of really good employees. So we all don't want that. Yet, even with all the things I consciously try to put in place, I've had first-hand experience in dealing with massive conflicts among my team members, a sign of toxicity in the workplace. In the past, for example, I discovered that one of my senior managers wanted to maintain the illusion of a perfect record in his department. To do so, he would manipulate his team into keeping their mouths shut when there was a problem that should have been reported up. And you may be asking, how did he manipulate them to keep their mouths shut? He used power and intimidation. If they dared to speak up, this manager would purposely amend the roster to punish complainants by scheduling them to work on public holidays or on exhausting long shifts that would leave people feeling steamrolled. Now, manipulative or hostile managers are a red flag. I've also been accused of favoring certain managers over others, even when I wasn't consciously doing so. I was judged on how often I interacted with a certain group of individuals over the rest. I was not even aware of how my actions could have been perceived differently by different people. I just tended to spend more time and give more assignments to people who I thought were high performers and those who spoke to me directly. And others who did not approach me were ignored unconsciously, and they felt neglected. So they complained. Now, earlier on in my career, when I was a young manager supervising junior staff for the first time, I made one of my analysts cry because I demanded a lot from her, and my boss almost fired me for that incident. A new manager faces a lot of challenges as they make that transition. If you're a good analyst or a good executive, you get promoted to be a manager. And then you expect your direct reports to be able to do things as well as you used to do when you were that executive or analyst. But of course, they can't because they don't have the experience you have. And you can get frustrated, lose control, or even lose your temper. So many mistakes I made. I had to pull all my hair out of frustration, but so many lessons that I've learned. So here I am, passing on those lessons to you. So throughout today's presentation, I want you to think about and reflect on how these lessons might apply to you. And I encourage you to take notes as you reflect. What will you do to address these common red flags in your work environment? So the first red flag is poor communication. In fact, communication weaves its way into other red flags that we're going to get to later. So I'll ask you this, right? Have you ever received flippant instructions from your boss, where the only expectation can only be that you read their mind about what they actually want you to do? Or have you ever come close to finishing a major project only to find a big important component is still missing because it wasn't clear who on the team will be in charge of doing it? Or have you ever received harsh feedback on some work that you did that you thought was unfair or unwarranted because the expectations were not made clear from the very beginning? Now, these are all examples where there has been a breakdown in communication, and it's something we all can improve on. And there are hundreds of other similar examples. One person meant one thing, another person perceived it differently. And that breakdown in communication led to incomplete tasks, embarrassment, and sometimes even major financial losses for the company. So here's what I want you to think about. As a team member or leader, how clearly are you communicating with your team? Is what you're saying being understood? Is the team aligned on what the expectations are? When our teams misunderstand, are we quick to blame them, or do we look at ourselves first to determine if we were sufficiently clear? Did we confirm that they understood our instructions? So here are a couple of truths on the back of that, right? Number one, you will be frustrated with someone, right? It's almost inevitable. Either your direct report, your boss, or your colleague. And you'll feel that they are the problem and they should change. And you are right and they are wrong. But wishing that someone else will change is wishful thinking, right? If you expect others to change, you're wasting your time. Instead, focus on what you can act on to deal with that situation. Number two, you'll have a tendency to automatically blame them. They frustrated you and it's their fault. And you'll stew on that. But in these instances, I want you to engage your curiosity instead. Pause and ask yourself, why are they acting that way? Is someone else pressuring them? Did something happen to them? If we can pause and ask these questions in our head instead of reacting to our first impulsive feeling, we exercise empathy and we take back control. Now, back to communication. As managers, are we creating an open and safe environment and a culture in which our team members are empowered to pose clarifying questions? If we're so strict and so imposing that our team members dare not speak up or challenge us, we bear the ultimate price. Now, as team members, how do we find the courage to speak up even if it means displeasing our superiors? Is our job just to say, yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, right? Do we leave it all to all the decision making to just the managers and leaders? And that approach might be the safe thing in the present, but does that really help our team or our organization in the long run? What will you pledge to do to improve communication in your organization? Communications is two-way. To help your team and to minimize some of the troubles that are created when these communication flows break down. Red flag number 2, a perpetual high-stress environment. Some of you have heard some of my other presentations, know that I talk a lot about stress, but why stress is necessary. Stress is a 100% natural response to a threat that we're facing. It's how we've evolved to survive, right? Back in the day, during times of crisis or danger, our primitive lizard brains induce a fight or flight response to keep us alive, right? Adrenaline would course through our bodies and activate our alert system, right? Our heart beats faster, our lungs expand, our muscles tighten up. And in this hyper-aroused state, our bodies are prepped to confront that imminent threat, right? So heart rate goes up, blood flow increases, respiration system maximizes, our breathings get stronger. And even non-critical functions like our digestive and reproductive system are slowed or even stopped because the body is focused on just a few motor skills and muscle groups to get us moving. And other physiological changes are happening too. In our eyes, our pupils become dilated, forcing our vision to narrow and to focus on immediately what's in front of us. And this is where that phrase tunnel vision comes. You only see what's immediately in front and you lose focus of things in the periphery. So in a highly stressful situation, a matter of life and death back in the day, your body is prepared to deal with that stress, and that stress only. Nothing else matters in that moment. But if you have an office job, rarely is your life on the line in the workplace setting. And yet, we still feel stress. So why is that? Because threats still exist. They just look different. We're threatened by unhappy or demanding bosses or disappointed clients. We fear looming deadlines or unmet KPIs. We have to deal with operational issues as part of our jobs and the pressure to fix, to build, to expand, to earn or deliver. Our lives may be not at risk, but physiologically and psychologically, our bodies still react like we may die. So here's why that is a red flag at work. Stress makes us less creative, less logical, less open-minded. We stop creative problem solving. We stop lateral thinking and cooperating, and that builds animosity and resentment. Because if that stress is directed at another person, you lose perspective and you only focus on the negative. The situation can also get personal, right? And that's very toxic. But stress is supposed to be temporary. Back in the day, when the danger is past, our hormones rebalance, right? We stop being hypervigilant when the brain perceives that threat has gone. But modern humans have evolved. Our bodies are now not only programmed to respond even when there's a real immediate threat in front of us, but we respond when there's a perceived, anticipated future stress, like an upcoming big presentation or pitch. Our brain triggers a response that dictates all of the same physiological responses, right? The heart rate starts to beat fast, the breathing increases, our palms get sweaty, that feeling of panic. That's what we called anxiety. Now, depression can be thought of as a similar reaction to a past stressor. Something stressful has happened in the past and it's long gone, and yet our brain replays that experience over and over, prompting our body to react in the way it did when that stressful event was real. And in many women, this can look like sadness or helplessness. And in men, this could also be triggered and look like anger and resentment. But in any case, it's negative. So not only do stress, anxiety, and depression reduce productivity, reduce engagement, harm communication and collaboration, and affect the quality of our work, they also significantly increase our risk factors for physical ailments, resulting in more delays of work, right, for medical reason. Another massive red flag. But let me guess. You feel the pressure to power through, right? You leave your stress, anxiety, and repression unresolved, and you overcommit. Continuing to work in the state is a one-way ticket to burnout. It's our body's way of saying, enough, right? We're either physically exhausted, mentally drained, or both. And we're no longer motivated to work. You no longer care about the quality of your work, whether your clients are satisfied or not. Nor do you care about your colleagues. You dread waking up and going to work each day. So signs of burnout include having chronic fatigue almost on a daily basis. Especially look out for tightness in your neck and lower back. Regularly losing sleep is also another sign, right? Losing sleep is insomnia, but also hypersomnia, where you have too much sleep. That's also another sign, or repeatedly waking up in the middle of the night. Another sign is the difficulty in controlling our temper, right? We get angry easily, like we just have constant mood swings. Another sign is our appetite gets disrupted, right? Suddenly we lose appetite. We no longer want to eat anything, or suddenly we have intense cravings for sugary and salty foods. That's a sign. Another is fever, dizziness, and sickness, which takes longer time to recover. And finally, also, when we have disengagement and loss of interest at work. Now, at this point, that's no longer just a red flag. A red flag is a warning. This is what happens when red flags are ignored. Okay, let's talk about red flag number 3, no boundaries. So this next red flag is a spin-off from the last one, right? Having no boundaries. So many of you have been working remotely, and we've heard from our members that the lines between work and home life have been blurred. Some managers have even told their employees that they must respond to WhatsApp or email messages immediately, especially if they're working remotely during work hours. And the only rationale is that if they were in the office, when the boss asked them something in person, they're available to respond. So they need to be at their computers and pay attention to their phones throughout the day. And home life obligations and responsibilities are not an excuse not to respond. Now, another issue we've heard a lot about is the thinly veiled threat where a manager reminds their team, hey, the employment market is very soft and people are losing their jobs. So if you want to keep your job, you must work extra hard, nights and weekends, to not be replaced. So you can imagine the undue stress and pressure that these employees face. So to the managers who are using these threats as a way of controlling remote teams, I ask, how would you feel if your boss applied the same pressure on you? Is this what you think will bring out the best in your team? Will it motivate them to go above and beyond and deliver more? Or will it feel like micromanaging and cause resentment? Now, I get it, right? Some of you may be getting this pressure from the top, but good managers take that pressure and shield their team from it. That's called flattening the stress curve. Instead of amplifying the stress and passing it on throughout the rest of the organization. Now, I also understand that there are some days when we have to push the teams hard to meet an important deadline. But if we must apply the highest level of intensity, it can only work for a short time. Anything beyond a few days will result in collective burnout, and that's not sustainable. So what happens if this isn't temporary? What can you do to set healthy boundaries? So for starters, and this goes back to the first red flag, we must improve communication. Regardless of your seniority in an organization, and it will vary, determine some ground rules for how you're going to engage with your work, and then make those ground rules known to the people that you work with. Give them a chance to respect your boundaries. If they don't know what the boundaries are, then it's going to be very hard for them to respect. So here's what I suggest. Identify your boundaries. Your personal boundaries will depend on your own values and life's priorities. You have a life outside of work, right? We've got family, friends, hobbies, and passions. So if you don't know your boundaries, you're doing yourself a disservice. Now, next, communicate your boundaries. This can be as simple as letting your team know that you don't answer emails after 7 p.m. If it's truly urgent, they can call you if there is an emergency. You can also communicate what constitutes a work emergency so that you're not fielding crises that just keep popping up every single day. Something that happens almost every day and every week, that's no longer an emergency. Now, when these preliminary steps are taken, you set yourself up to have your time at work and away from work respected. Now, but wait, I hear you saying, oh, you can't do that. You're powerless. Your boss is demanding and you can't have the boundary conversation with them. I challenge you. You are not powerless. You just have to be a bit more structured in your approach. For starters, pick a good time to bring this up. These sorts of conversations lend themselves to times when people have time to reflect and have an actual discussion. That's right. So pick your time when you bring it up to your boss. Next, be tactful in your request. For example, if you need flexibility because you have to take care of young children at home or aging parents, instead of asking for flexibility and being at the mercy of your boss, whether they will grant your request or not, ask first what's really important for him or her. What are the real deadlines and what quality is needed to complete certain tasks? Then use what-if statements and suggest how you can meet those requirements. For example, right, if your boss needs interim status updates, commit to updating the status in a collaboration tool so that your boss knows that projects are on track and you get the flexibility you need to juggle some of your other obligations. But also, be flexible yourself, right? If you get a response that's not what you wanted, ask for a rationale and then offer to take time to think about how you can best support that requirement, right? This gives you some time to come back with a compromise proposal. Now, leaders and managers must take responsibility for the psychological safety of our teams, irrespective of the pressures we get from those above us. The first step is to understand each of our team members. What are their goals and aspirations? What are their personal constraints and challenges? Especially now that some of us are juggling work from home arrangements and being asked to return to the office. What I've found in the Malaysian culture and across Southeast Asia is that our team members are reluctant to speak up and tell us the problems they face. If you say, hey, I've got an open door policy, come to me if you've ever got a problem or idea, right? They won't. If you do management by walkabout, right, and ask people how they're doing, they'll just say, all good, boss. And they won't openly tell you their frustrations and challenges. If you have team meetings or town halls or team members, and you ask your team members for questions or comments, no one's going to speak up. As leaders, we cannot say, well, I've given them the opportunity. If they don't want to speak up, there's nothing more I can do. We have to earn the right to receive feedback. And there is something we can always do. For starters, assess our own management or leadership style. Really reflect on the culture you value versus the culture you perpetuate. Are they consistent? If not, make a plan to ensure that the two will be aligned. Second, lead by example. There is strength in vulnerability. Be honest about your own experiences and be open about the steps or resources you're employing to cope better. This will give license to others on your team to do the same. And over time, the stigmas associated with help seeking will eventually dissolve. And third, finally, build healthy boundaries and encourage your teams to do the same. Think of boundaries as rules of engagement. If you and your team members establish healthy boundaries, and most importantly, if you respect those boundaries, you're likely to build a culture of mutual respect and empathy that promotes goodwill and enhances collaboration. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you all could take something away from this that you will choose to implement in your workplaces. And I'm now going to hand over to our team psychologist for the Q&A. Thank you, everyone.